Hi there, thanks for joining me for this short tutorial on how to complete a risk assessment. In this 10 minutes we're going to look at the step-by-step process of actually filling out a risk assessment template, and you can follow along by downloading the free risk assessment template that we offer at safety.com, which I'll drop a link to below. Also, don't forget that we have a completely free risk assessment course available, and you can join thousands of other students in taking advantage of that, and we'll also pop a link below to the course if you want to go on and learn more. So that's enough of me waffling, let's get started with this short tutorial. Okay then, let's get stuck into looking at a risk assessment template. First things first, on this free fillable version, you will be able to add your company name at the top here. So let's use up in this left hand corner, Safety Limited, for the purposes of this demonstration. And also up at the top right hand side, you'll be able to put in the address of your business as well. Okay, once that's done, we're ready to move on to the main body of the risk assessment, and you may notice up in the top right as well, we are using the simple version of the risk matrix here for the purposes of this demonstration. There is a more complex version that's available from the safety shop that comes with the risk assessment template bundle, should you want something that is more appropriate for higher risk or more complex activities. But for the less complex or low risk activities, this simple matrix should certainly suffice. So let's move on to the main body of the template then itself. First of all, we're looking at filling in some details around what it is we're actually risk assessing here. So the first thing to look at is the name of the task or activity. We want to keep this quite succinct and as accurate as possible. Depending on your business, you may want to identify a specific location, for example, that the risk assessment refers to, and also to avoid ambiguity, if there are multiple sites or, for example, warehouses, which we're going to use in this example, that have different activities, you can specify which one this risk assessment relates to. So let's just pop some information into that there, and we'll call this the warehouse operations for the headquarters. Next then, we'll look at the description of work portion, which should really just cover the scope of work that you're actually going to look at for this risk assessment. You may not only want to specify what is covered by the assessment, but also identify anything significant that is not included within this risk assessment. For example, operations of a cardboard compactor or waste management process in a warehouse, you may want to exclude that. So let's just do that as an example there. We'll put some information in for what we're covering on this one. So there we go. As you can see, we've identified what we are covering in the headquarters warehouse, which includes the storage and movement of goods, loading and unloading heavy goods vehicles, and forklift operations. Just as an example, we've also stipulated at the end that it doesn't include the operation of the cardboard compactor or anything to do with waste management on this part of the site. Okay, the last bit of administrative details that we're putting in here is the start date and the estimated completion date. I hope these are pretty self-explanatory, but just to give more background, the start date is simply to identify the time at which you think the risk assessment will become active. In other words, when is the activity or task starting? And the completion date is just to give an indication as to whether the project is time limited or if your activity or process is ongoing, in which case you can simply write ongoing into this box. So let's just fill that part out. Let's just put in 21st of January 2021 for the start date. Okay, now we can move on to the risk assessment itself. And first up, we want to identify the significant hazards that exist within the activity or task. As an example here, we're going to use the old working at height favourite, using ladders to access areas of the warehouse. This could apply to things like racking, shutter doors, or access to any internal infrastructure. We want to identify the hazards themselves and what type of activity may require the use of ladders. For hazards identified, we want to make sure we identify the hazard itself, which is the use of ladders, and the risk from that, of course, is more generally working from height and falls from height. And also what we want to do is specify the type of activity that takes place within this environment that may require the use of ladders. So let's just fill that out. So as you can see there, we put in the use of ladders, in other words working from height. Access to different features of the warehouse is often needed for racking, for example, ad hoc tasks and maintenance activities as well. So once you've got that down, then our next step is to look at who might be harmed and how. We've identified something that may present a significant risk to people. Now we need to provide some detail on who might be harmed and how. We've already stated that warehouse operators require access at height to different features within the warehouse, so naturally they're going to be at a potential risk. Other than those operators, can you think of anyone else who may be impacted? Well, typically there is considerable amounts of maintenance required within these types of environments, some of which may require working at height and could possibly be carried out via the use of ladders. This could be anything from racking repairs to shutter door servicing to replacing a lighting fixture. When it comes to doing your own risk assessment, you want to put in enough detail to accurately reflect those affected within your workplace. Rightio, now we're moving on to the nitty gritty of doing the risk rating. We must evaluate the risk presented by the hazard as it exists. This is where we refer to our risk matrix and want to decide firstly the level of potential severity of injury or illness that may be caused, and secondly the likelihood or probability of the harm being caused. Before we consider our control measures to manage the risk, we want to score the risk according to there being no controls in place. In other words, what the potential outcome would be if no risk mitigation were to take place. As you can see for this one, we've decided to opt for this hazard for a severity level of 3, which reflects the potential for major injury or even a fatality caused by a fall from height. And for likelihood, we've designated a level of 3 also, which indicates that the outcome is very likely. This reflects both the frequency of working at height within this environment and the fact that falls from height due to the use of ladders are very common across industrial workplaces, particularly where there are no proactive risk controls in place. That leaves us with a risk score of 9, which means that uncontrolled, this particular hazard presents a high risk of injury or illness. In this case, it's going to be injury due to a fall from height. So, with that being the case, we need to look at the control measures required. When considering the risk control measures or mitigation that might be required here, it's very important to find the balance between the cost, time and effort necessary to implement the controls versus the level of risk reduction that you foresee being achieved. We must make this decision in the context of the risk that exists to those affected with no control measures in place. And as we've seen on our risk matrix, it currently stands at a score of 9, which is the highest level of risk, and that would be unacceptable. Let's put some information around the control measures into the appropriate box here. Okay, in this case, purely as our example, we have decided that the use of alternative means of access, such as safety platforms and or scissor lifts, would be appropriate as an engineered control. The use of ladders is not deemed appropriate due to the environment that we're working in, the type of work that's taking place, and the frequency that ladders would be needed. Once those control measures are recommended and implemented, we are able to rescore our risk rating. And in this case, an example of where we might get to once those control measures are implemented is for severity, we would remain at level 3 in terms of the outcome from a fall from height. But in terms of likelihood of that happening, I would say we could reduce that down to a level 1, which would be unlikely with the use and the safe use of safety platforms and scissor lifts as an alternative to the use of ladders. When we multiply the severity by the likelihood with the new score, we would get 3 multiplied by 1, which is 3 of course, and that gives us a risk rating of 3, which is in the green zone, which is a much more acceptable level of risk for your operation. From that point then, you should complete this process for all of the associated significant hazards within the scope of your risk assessment. You can see at the bottom section here as well that we've provided some space for the person completing the assessment to sign it off, put the date on it, and add any additional notes that they would like to communicate as part of this assessment. This may include recommendations on implementing the control measures, future review dates, and so forth. Also, you'll notice on the right hand side that there's a checkbox list for further health and safety assessments that may be required as an outcome of the risk assessment findings, such as manual handling, COSH, or health surveillance. So that's it for this short tutorial on going through the process of completing your risk assessment template. Hopefully you picked up some helpful hints and tips going through this short video. Do remember, as I said at the beginning, we have loads of free resources over on the safety website, including that free, completely 100% free risk assessment course, and you can join thousands of others by taking advantage of that for you or your team. We'll leave a link for you to go ahead and do that. Thank you for joining us, and all the best with your risk assessments. Take care.